And we are live for another Coaching Wisdom Pod with Trent Allan. Today, he is co-founder at FX1. He is also a board member. He is an entrepreneur. He's a business growth advisor. We're going to talk about grit today because, Trent did the Kokoro 55, which was under my radar for quite some time. Plus, we're going to talk about business, technology, blockchain, everything in between. This podcast brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start, scale, or even be invited to a podcast, it's my podcasting company. If you want to get great guests like Trent Allan and get insights from them, get more subscribers, so exchange audiences, sort of get leads and even clients, a podcast can help you for that. Podfire.com is the way to go. Trent, I'm glad to have you on. Can you briefly introduce yourself and tell us about what you're up to nowadays?
Sure. So I'm an entrepreneur, like through and through. I knew it from almost not the day that I was born, but very young. I was very young when I knew that, hey, I wanted to at least be a company owner or start a business of some form. I didn't realize at that point that I would go so aggressive into starting companies and really trying to change the way the world works with the companies that I create. So coming out of school or getting into second grade, I realized my love for technology, which started when my dad brought home a computer for us. I was about, I think, 7 or 8 at the time. He brought home a PC. It had nothing on it. I had to install Windows. It was just DOS back then, right? So there was no fancy graphics or anything like that. It was just DOS, but I set it up, I installed it, I figured it out, I got it working, and we eventually got Windows like UI installed. And that was where my love started. I just thought, this is what I want to do. This like technology is just crazy. So got into programming, out of school, went to college, got in computer science, knowing that I wanted to do technology and programming. And back step, I started programming in high school in Visual Basic, then moved to school, started programming in C++. That was the language that I learned, and then moved to C# as I moved to a web-based technology. But that were the Windows days. I'm not a fan of Windows at all anymore. Everything I do is Linux-based, Unix-based, Mac-based. But I've got a love for technology. I'm a bit of a nerd, but I'm a unique nerd because I do things most nerds don't do, which I'm sure you'll touch on later. But that's it. So it's like I've got a deep love and understanding of technology. I understand developers. I understand how tech is built, and I understand how to use technology to solve business problems and real world life problems. But I bring that together with my, advanced ability to write copy. I'm a great copywriter. I have got business acumen. I've led companies. I've had roles as CFO. So I've across the board. I know how to build companies. I know how to grow them. I know how I'm in depth with operations at a company. I make a good CEO, CEO, CTO because I've been there at the top of companies as they grow. I was the third employee to Appliances Online, which is an Australian company. Back in 2006, it was just a small company. I was the third employee. But it's now Australia's largest online appliance retailer, and they sell one out of every 2 dishwashers in the country. Their overall group generates, I think, in excess of $500 million annually. So they are very, very successful. They got over 1,000 staff, and I was there from the very beginning to help them grow and help them scale. So yeah, I'm sure I can keep talking, but I'll stop there. I'm sure you've got some questions off the back of that.
Yeah, well, Vasco Pay, that's quite interesting what you did there. Started that one in 2014, and then what happened in 2020?
Oh, yeah, interesting. So Vasco Pay, I'm not like I've got a long timeline in my head of like what I did in what order, but I was introduced to what is now a good friend, Leo Borovilis, who was looking to start a fintech company in the prepayment space. So I was introduced to him early on. We worked together to build that company over the next, I think, about 4 years, and we're eventually acquired by a public company called Novati. So that was a short sprint of building a company, but we were pretty impressed that with that revenue, we were able to be purchased by a public company, which was just a huge win for us, knowing that, hey, we could possibly stay at this longer and try and get bought out for a larger amount, but knowing that, hey, the position that we're in will still pre-revenue, we'll still, really proving out the product, but for a big public company to see the light in us and see the potential in us was quite amazing for us and quite a win for us. So yeah, we hustled, we faced all the problems that startups face in trying to build a new company that solves new problems, and we did it and we're able to get an outcome. So that was definitely one of the things that I'm proud of doing, given the outcome that we were able to achieve in quite a relatively small time. Yeah.
Right. And
And
you
then,
joined the launch house for a reason. Like, you think you had a pretty interesting background, and then FX1 plus the business advising stuff. Like, how do you split your time nowadays?
I'm one of the most productive people I know. And I'm not someone that gloats or is super proud of myself, or like, I'm someone that's quite humble, but I can humbly say that I'm one of the most productive people I know. I use time blocking, and it's not just how I time block my days, but it's how I make sure that what I put into my schedule is what I actually need to work on. Like, what is the most important stuff to work on? And that's easier said than done, because people work their whole careers thinking what they're working on is the important stuff, when if you really, really drilled it down and distilled it down, you'd think it wasn't the most important stuff. You're working on the shiny objects, the things that you thought were important. But if you sat back and looked at the mission of where you're trying to get to, so point A is here, this is where you're trying to get to, you're trying to go in a straight line. Most people do this. They just jig off and they go off to the side, and they don't get there straight because they're working on things that seem important, but they're not. So I think that's how I get all this done, is I plan my days in advance. There's not a moment on my calendar that is free a day before I start my day. So I make sure that I know exactly what I'm doing at every point in time the day before I start the day. And I make sure that what I'm working on, it comes back to that. Does it help me get to where I'm going? And that's split between, FX1's the amazing startup that I'm so lucky to be a part of, and my other work that I do around advisory, coaching, consulting. How do I mix all them together? It's based on a few of those things, man. Time blocking is one, but it's not just time blocking. It's making sure you're working on the right stuff. I'm sure we could talk for hours on that topic alone.
Well, I'm honored that you accept the invite to my pod. If you're obsessed with your time, I'm also obsessed with my time, yet it's always somewhat subjective and depends on your strategy of what you judge is important for you. Yeah. And sometimes I have a hard time explaining that meeting or interviewing 15 CEOs per day is a productive strategy. But I think it is. It's odd enough, and being obsessed as I am with product market fit and with the library of knowledge I have, plus the goals that I want to achieve, making $1 trillion in less than 30 years, I think this is a way to reach it. It's certainly odd, but it's a good start, to say the least, with the ecosystem I'm trying to build. Honored that you accept the podcast and also the mastermind. That shows that you somewhat value me, and that's pretty cool. What did you learn from working at all of these startups? Any insights you can share to us founders?
Yeah, quite a lot, I'd say. So I don't know where to start. It's like a really broad question, but what's the number one? I think just hustle and wanting what you want, right? Because when you try and start a company, when you get into doing something that is really hard, you have to really, really want it. And I think that's true for any high-level job that you may go into. There are going to be times where you're tested. There are going to be times where you don't want to do what you're doing anymore. So you inherently have to have a really strong passion for what you're doing, a real strong reason why you must complete what you're working to complete, and know the outcome that you're trying to get to. Because if you don't, you'll quit. And we see a lot of people that don't even start a business in the first place. And then we see people that do, but they end up quitting because it just gets too hard. So I think having the strong why behind what you're doing, realizing why it's so important that you do what you're trying to do, will keep you in the game when most people quit. And it's persistence in this life that really works out. You look at most successful people, and the one attribute they've got a few, but one of them is persistence. They were able to stick at the same thing or similar things for a long time in order to get really good at what they were doing. That's what they built into themselves. That's how they did it, So persistence and having that strong why will keep you there. But the persistence isn't enough if you can't have a strong reason for being there.
Once you have the soft part settled down, what about the technical part? How do you reach product market fit as quick as possible?
Yeah. Again, it's a really unique question, because again, you could talk about it for hours. But product market fit is really knowing that what you've built is working. And there's a number of things that tell you when you're there: product feedback, numbers, metrics, revenue. There's a few things that go in, but I think founders typically know when they've hit that product market fit. It's when things are a bit crazy and the results seem too good to be true. That's when you kind of think, holy crap, we've now hit something, we've got retention. I think how to get to that, well, you need to look at, okay, what problem are we solving? What's the business actually doing? Like what service or offering are we providing to the customers? And then are we solving that problem for the customer? And if you're solving that problem for the customer and you're doing it in a good way, you'll see people coming back and using your company again and again and again. And that's what leads to that product market fit, because people love what you do and it's so sticky that they'll come back and use you again. And then it becomes part of almost their daily or weekly habits to come and use your product. That's what product market fit is in my view, but we're not here to discuss what it is. It's more so how do you get there? And I think it's, listening to your customers, coming back to the problem that you're solving and really sticking on that. I always tell founders, if you ever get stuck, come back to the problem, because the problem's where your solution sits. It's what you started this business in the first place for. It's that problem. So keep revisiting that problem and just keep asking yourself, are you solving that problem in the most sufficient way? And do your customers enjoy the solution that you're providing for that problem? And you know what they're enjoying it. They're using the product, right? They're coming back again and again.
One definition I like is like being dragged in. I hear that a lot by the market. That is, I love using cold email to feel that product market fit and note like what segment has what type of interest for what service or what product. I think that's a unique approach, and it's almost instant feedback nowadays. I think, like in my case with the podcast, I can definitely feel I'm being dragged in, although like most of it is outreach, which is like my background, so that kind of makes sense, but I'm getting more and more organic. Now if I dive in the problem, there's a fuck ton of podcasts out there, so
yeah,
the classic definition is not super applicable, which is like life, and not always the same definition applies to all the stuff that you do. I would also describe it broadly in those terms with momentum, like how much energy are there in your days? Like are people also happy about your end product? How much times do you get good feedback on a daily basis? What's the frequency of that? And then there's the quality of conversations. Oh, Charles, thank you for that. You're a great interviewer. But then even that, you need to question it, Is it good feedback? Is it, for example, when someone says good question on a podcast, right? They don't mean that I'm a good question asker. They mean this is an interesting question.
Yeah, and they possibly
that's where
the answer to
discernment is a keyword I heard yesterday. But yeah, let's see where that can scale, right? Because Joe Rogan, 2-3 hours podcast. We see also shorter form podcasts.
Yeah.
And how could I make this podcast better? How could I make it a better product according to you?
Yeah. Is that a question?
It is.
Quality of guests. I think there's only a few podcasts that I listen to. There's lots that are in my feed, but like Tim Ferriss's podcast is one of them. He's an amazing question asker. Like one, he gets good guests on, and that comes through who he is and his ability to attract good guests. But what got him there was his ability to ask good questions. I've been in interviews with people, both on podcasts and in real life, where it just hasn't gone anywhere because they didn't ask the right questions. One, they didn't have the right questions preset to ask. And two, they weren't able to, on their feet, create the question based on what I just said. The best people I've spoken to, the people that got the most out of me in interviews, whether any kind of interview or podcast, were people that were able to dynamically generate questions based on what I just said. Feeling the energy, feeling me, and then digging into something that some other people just completely skirt over. They just move on to the next question where there was a ton of gold right there, but the interviewer was not good enough to sit there and uncover that a little bit more. And again, depending on how much time you have for a podcast, sometimes it's not possible to dig in and spend lots of time on a certain subject. And that's where I think long format podcasts can be really good, because you are able to really dive in and get the real gold from someone based on their insights and what they've learned. So not saying you can't do it on short form, right? You can absolutely distill great information. There are a lot of good short form podcasts out there, but yeah, that's kind of my feedback. That's how I think you create a good one, good questions. And then off the back of good questions, you should inherently attract more, guests to your podcast, because your
I
podcast will
think
grow
that's
in
the
numbers.
core. I think that's the main product, right? The interviewer. And I think even with a bad interviewee, an interviewer can make the whole thing shine by himself. Long form, I think, up until I'm like Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss, yeah, it's gonna be short form. Plus, I need to have a superstar guest, is like the interviewer and the interviewee are great. Do you still believe in the format of podcasting? Like, how do you consume your information nowadays?
Oh, like most people, I skim. I try and hack my way to find out as much as I can, but I still read a lot of books, but I will skip parts in books if I don't feel it's relevant, or if I know it, I'll happily skip it. I won't read a book from start to finish if I don't need to, if it's not new and fresh. But I think I'm always looking to spend the least time to get the biggest output, right? And if that's means I'm on a podcast and listening, and I just fall off with it. I'm like, you know what, this is boring me. I stop the podcast, right? And I take what I learned from it in that section that I was on it. So I think it's about knowing that, hey, I want to learn, and while I'm learning, I'm on. But as soon as I stop learning, I'm off, right? Because I want to save time. I want to be as productive as I can. If a podcast has sections in it, like chapters, I can then go to that chapter that I want and distill that information. It's one of the reasons I don't really listen to the Joe Rogan podcast anymore, because I just feel it's too random. Like, I feel like he gets on there and just blah, 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 about subjects. And sometimes you get, great information, depends on the guest that he's got on there, but he's driving it towards his agenda, not always the agenda of the guest. And I just think he's so big now, right? He can do what he wants, right? But I just feel his podcast is too hit and miss. And there are nuggets of gold in there, but there's a lot of crap around the edges that I'm just not interested in. But look, there's a lot of people that love his podcast and listen to all of them. So each their own. But just for me, there's just too much, there's too much noise and not enough gold. I would rather, wait for a year to pass, go back and look at what are the top Joe Rogan podcasts, and then go back and selectively listen to those, because I'd rather get the feedback on what's good before I go and spend my time, because he produces a lot of podcasts, right? If you want to listen to them all, it'd take a lot of time,
Yeah, if you've got like a favorite entrepreneur of yours on the show, might be relevant. Chapters would be a good idea. I don't even think he uses chapters on YouTube. And he has a Spotify deal. Spotify can have chapters as well. I agree with you, but a lot of people, it's all about the audience, right? Like, they listen to Joe Rogan to blow off steam. They had stressful days, and they're like, right now I don't want to hear any fucking thing about business. But you're my niche, though. Like Trent is part of my niche. Like meet CEOs, and that's also how I consume my information. I don't spend much time blowing steam nowadays. It's purely information. I love Twitter because it's like micro snippets, and I think there's a lot of good content creator on Twitter. You're probably there too. Me, the challenge with my content is one that you just mentioned, is that I do it for me first, and finding other Charles out there is like almost impossible. It's like a business intellectual / philosopher. So I'm trying to put myself more in the skin of my audience. Did you had a hard time doing that yourself, or are you now on that level in which you're fully capable of stepping the shoes of your end customer and producing great content for them?
Oh, just repeat that question again. I kind of thought it was two questions. So you talked about like producing content for the customer.
Yeah, product market fit. So are you able to step in your customer's shoes and produce valuable content for them?
Yeah, I think I can. I've been doing user testing for a long time. Back at my early days at Appliances Online, I employed user testing, which was usually online tests, not in-person tests. But listening to the customer, understanding what they want, getting feedback, listening to feedback, speaking to customers. There's like a whole lot in that, there's so much gold in that to figure out what they want and where you need to move your product. And it usually comes from the customer, because without customers, you don't have a company, and therefore customers are really important to your company. And what those customers think about your company, what they love about your company, what they hate about your company is all super relevant and important. Because again, without those customers, your company doesn't exist, right? So, it's just so important that we listen to our customers, that we understand what they want, where they're headed. They don't always know what they want. As Henry Ford said, if people knew what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse, right? Because they wouldn't have said, hey, develop me a car, because they didn't know that was possible. So you can't always rely on them for innovation, but they're pretty good at knowing if you are on point with what you're doing or not, if you're solving the problem for them, right? They'll tell you straight up, like whether you're doing it or not, and you'll see it in your metrics. But I feel that, no matter what you are building, just come back to the customer, listen to them, do research interviews with them, call them, speak to them, interview them, do whatever you need to do to get the insight of what they really think about your product. And also look at your metrics to tell you the truth on whether what you're building is working or not, because that will tell you if you've got product market fit, because it'll be sticky, you'll have higher attention, people will be coming back again and again to use it.
Talking about that, a lot of companies are building community as a backend nowadays. Are you doing that with some of your companies? Have you been exploring the community side of things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, FX1 is a community platform, right? We're building a platform that is really here to solve a big problem in sports, and that is community based. We're fan based, right? Sports fans is who we're serving. So we are a community first platform that relies on a community to build our company, right? Without a community, we just do not exist. And that's some of the success we've had this year, being able to build a small but highly vibrant and engaged community that are really passionate about sports and are really passionate about us solving the problems that we're looking to solve. So yes, I think for some products, communities, are really, really important. For other products where it's more, transactional, you're buying a certain product, then communities are less important. So it depends on the company you're building, of course.
What value have you got out of Launch House?
Oh, look, in the time it was running, there was value. I was lucky enough to be accepted. They had a very low acceptance rate. Like a lot of people were rejected from their applications. So I know I was very lucky to get in. I was able to go down and meet the founder of Launch House, go to a dinner with them, meet other entrepreneurs. I was also part of like these calls that we did, the kind of not sprint calls, but they were like meetup calls that I did with a squad of other entrepreneurs that were, the same as me in terms of what we're building. So there was definitely value there. I met people through it. I got ideas. I learned things through it, but unfortunately it came to a bit of an abrupt end only about 3 months into me starting with Launch House. So I'm not sure where they are, but, it was just a bit of an abrupt end to what seemed like a good product. And I think all of us are still scratching our head wondering what happened to Launch House, because not much has happened since the day that it was kind of like, shut down.
I'm having one of the co-founder on the pod soon.
Finishing Maybe I'll be able to tell you.
Yeah, there you go. I'll send you the episode. I mean, you love experimenting stuff visibly on your end. SealFit was another way of you to integrating that sort of community for 2 days and challenging yourself to various degrees. Why did you do that? Like, I know you have grit in you, but like, why did you felt the need to challenge yourself to such an extent?
Oh, so it started, a good friend of mine, Ben, who runs a human performance or entrepreneur performance program. He's based in Australia. He got me involved in a program in Sydney, which was a 24-hour not Navy SEALs. There's a 24-hour SAS program, and that program was 24 hours long. It was with SAS soldiers, and they were there to push you and get you to do what you didn't think you could do. So Ben Salkard got me involved. He said we should be doing this. He was my mentor at the time, and we went and did it. And it was a complete shock to me. I mean, I'm a fitness guy. I've been boxing for almost 2 decades. I've had 22 fights as an amateur boxer, and now a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. So I know fitness, I know toughness. I know, I've been through it all in pushing my body to the ends of where I can push it. But this 24-hour SAS challenge in Sydney was the new level for me. Like it was insane, like just how tough it was and what they pushed us to do. Like it was truly insane. after finishing that, I swore I would never do anything like it again. And even months after, I just, had nightmares from it. It was so grueling and tough. And, I just thought I've done it now. I don't need to do that again. But as time passed, I started to think, how awesome was that? That like I grew so much in that. I need to do something else. And that led me to searching online for other things like it. And I'll tell you now, there's not much that exists like that, right? There's obviously not a huge market for doing crazy things like that, where you actually pay money to inflict pain on yourself, right? There's not much market for it. So I looked online, looked in the US, and I found Sea of Fit, it's an organization created by ex-Navy SEALs. They're based here in California, where I now live, and they were doing a few programs that were similar to the SAS one that I did. They had like an 8-hour, a 24-hour. They had the biggest, which is the 52-hour, and that's the Kokoro. They call it the Kokoro. And so I looked at it and I thought, that's what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to pay for this and sign up and then travel to the US and go and do it. And that's what I did. So I remember when I bought it, I paid the money, and it was like $3,000 or $4,000, right? So it wasn't a small amount of money. I remember hitting the buy button and I had instant regret. I had instant, buyer's remorse, thinking like, what have I done? Like these emotions, this anxiety came over me. I thought, what have I done? Right. And it happened as soon as I pressed the buy button, because I knew what I was in store for, right? 52 hours is a long time, And so, yeah, it was crazy. And the whole experience was, I'm doing a lot of tough things, and the last 4 years since I've done Kokoro have been incredibly challenging for me. Probably the most challenging in my entire life. Moved countries, started a new business, started a startup that, is trying to change the way sports are consumed. I've done a lot. It's really tested me. I had a family. I've got a daughter now who's just over a year and a half old. And, all these things have really tested me. And I know that it was Kokoro that set me up for what was to come, because whenever I doubt myself, whenever I think I can't do this, I say to myself, Trent, you did Kokoro, man. You did it, Like we had 29 people pay for the event. We had like 19 people show up and about 11 of us finished. Right. So most people quit. Some of them quit before they come, pouring that money down the drain that they paid for the event. Then about another half of the people that turn up quit during the event, because it's brutal. Like I had grown men crying during Kokoro, right? It was like one of the toughest things I've ever done.
Yeah, we all have a little bitch in us. That's a quote that I wrote on my Twitter, and I'm pretty sure Kokoro would get my little bitch out. It's a good way to summarize it. Now, I will do it. If you want to do it again, we'll do it together.
Sounds great, man. And I do have, I'd love to do a bigger one than the 52, but with enough time passing, I feel like maybe the 52 will be enough, because it will still push me. It probably won't be easier the second time around, even though that I think it will be. It will probably be harder the second time around, given that it may be a little bit older.
Because your mind will fuck with you. It's like, you know what's coming.
Yeah. But I'd love to do it with you, man. They do it every, I think, for a year. And it's like I said, it's, it's not for everybody, but it will change you. It will change who you are. It will change how you think for the better.
Yeah, me, I know I'll cry, like maybe not out of bitchery, but like I'll have like these transcendental moments, which I have in those ultra events, is like, it's like touching the hand of God or something, because you're in between consciousness and non-consciousness, and you're outgrowing yourself, so much brain chemicals going up and in there. I'll know I have a transcendental moment, especially they have you do yoga and breath work, right?
Yep, they do.
There you go. Yeah. It's game fucking changing.
Bro,
on my map in less than 5 years. Thanks for coming on, Trent. That was super cool. And I know the pain you've been through Kokoro. Plus, the life also is like, it's quite challenging. So good job on that. I can certainly relate very much. Where can people find out more about you?
LinkedIn, Twitter, and sorry, there's like I'm working at home, and working at home has challenges because you often get noises around the home. But in case you can hear, there's a blower going. But
no, we can't.
We can find me. You can find me on Twitter. Trenny Sense is my handle. You can also find me on LinkedIn. They're the two platforms that I'm most active on. You can see me there. I urge you to check out FX1, fx1.io. And if you know anyone that's interested in advisory work, I do coaching, consulting, and advisory for companies that are looking to grow, then you can find me at trentallan.com. That's TRENTALLAN.com.
And I'm Charles Cormier, host. That was another founder